I found my best friend's husband on Tinder, and when I told her, she broke up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I have a pretty good relationship with my best friend. We're able to be honest with each other, but about certain things, I just can't talk to her. She's very, very snarky. She thinks she's very funny. So when I tell her sometimes about my deepest, darkest secrets or the problems I'm having in my marriage, weeks later, she'll put her foot in her mouth and bring it up in front of other people. I have called her out for it, but she still doesn't understand why it would bother me that she's bringing up private things that I've told her in the past. When she tells me all of her private problems, I will never repeat them to anybody else. That's what best friends are for. She has a history of making mean jokes, but because she's naturally abrasive, she doesn't realize she's being mean. For example, sometimes she makes fun of my weight. She knows I've been trying to lose weight for 5 years, and I finally got on Ozempic. Only then did I actually start to lose weight. This is when she started calling me an Ozempic baby. I kind of laughed it off, and my husband did too, but then my husband called her out for it. And when he did, she's like, oh my gosh, you guys have no sense of humor. But this is what happened with her husband. My husband actually works for Tinder, and he asked me to download the app to look at some things. He kind of uses me like his guinea pig. It's actually pretty fun, and we do it together on the couch. As we're scrolling through the app, we see a very familiar picture. It happens to be my best friend's husband. When we click into the profile, he's posting pictures that he's literally taken with her at restaurants. By the way, my husband and I have a theory that he only married her because of her money. She comes from a really wealthy family, and he's way better looking than she is. And this just gets even worse. Go to part 2. I found my bestie's husband on Tinder, and when I told her about it, she broke up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. Once my husband and I see the account, he goes on his work laptop and confirms that it's actually his account. My husband and I decided that I just needed to tell her. Now, my best friend is notorious for being very, very dramatic, so I was kind of not wanting to tell her, but I knew I had to. Okay, and a little side note. In part 1, I said that she's snarky and she has foot in the mouth syndrome, and that she sometimes spills my secrets. So you're probably wondering why I would be best friends with her, but she's always been there for me. So I invite her out to a cafe the next morning, and as soon as we sit down, I start to cry. Comes over to comfort me, but I couldn't actually get the words out of my mouth, so I just pulled out my phone and showed her husband's Tinder account. That's when she says, why are you showing this to me? And I told her I thought you'd want to know the truth. Then the most bizarre thing happened. She began to list off all the reasons I'm envious of her. That I've always wanted her life, I envy her relationship with her perfect husband, that I envy her money, and that I wish I was as skinny as she is. But I defended myself quickly. I told her that of course I didn't feel those things, and that all I wanted to do was have her back and show her husband's Tinder account. That's when she started telling me that even though her husband cheats on her, doesn't mean that I'm better than her. That my relationship with my husband is better. This is when I found out through another friend that she knew he had been cheating on her for 2 months on Tinder. That she's so desperate to keep him happy that she just ignores it. And she pays for all of his bills. Because I know for a fact this man does not work. She told my friend group that my husband and I are envious and that we're starting to make up rumors about her husband cheating. Now we're the outcasts. What should I do? I walked in on my husband getting breastfed by his mother on our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, send me on Instagram. All of this happened on our wedding day. But 3 weeks before the wedding, the weirdest thing happened. Literally, nobody prepares you for how stressful planning a wedding is. To be honest, it's been the worst time of my life, and I'm 22. My husband is 25. We met 3 years ago traveling, and we happened to be from the same city while traveling. It was crazy. We thought it was meant to be. We were inseparable from the first day we met. We met each other's parents a week after we met each other. We integrated into each other's families flawlessly. We have the same values and morals. So moving in together was the logical next step. And it happened super quick. A month after meeting, we moved in together. He proposed to me almost a year ago. He comes from a super rich family. My family lives comfortably, but his parents are millionaires. So his mom hired a wedding planner, which is amazing because it's totally taken the stress off of us. Now for the wedding planning, we usually meet once a week with the wedding planner, and his mom always comes with us. On one of these meetings, I wasn't able to attend, so my husband and his mom met together. I knew that they were going to get lunch afterwards, so I decided to surprise them. Instead of being at the restaurant they said they were going to be in, they were in the parking lot. I could see their car. Okay, now one thing about my mother-in-law, she always wears low-cut shirts. Now she's got great boobs, so I understand why. As I'm approaching the car, I can see my husband leaning into his mom's side. He's in the driver's seat, he's in the passenger. I thought, oh sweet, he has his head on her shoulder. But as I got closer, I realized his head was not on her shoulder. It was lower than that. As soon as I knock on the window, they both jump up. That's when out of the corner of my eye, I see her adjusting her top, her very low-cut top. And the first thing I thought was, wouldn't it be funny if he was breastfeeding? And my mother-in-law accused me of spying on them. I'm about to get on a flight, part 2 will be up in 3 hours. I walked in on my husband getting breastfed by his mother on our wedding day. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. And this is part 2. After the car incident, she accused me of spying on them. I had walked up to the car where they were parked and I saw his head really close to her chest and her trying to adjust her top really quickly. I said I was definitely not trying to spy on them and that I just saw their car parked there. But of course, my husband tried to play it all off. He said that his head was hurting and that he was just resting on her shoulder. But the problem is I couldn't get it out of my head. The way she was adjusting her top, it was so weird. And her accusing me of spying on them? Up until this point, my mother-in-law was always very cool with me. So for her to suddenly turn on me like this, I knew something was up. So later that night, I asked my husband what was going on. And of course, he said that I had scared them and that she was just reacting off of that. From this day on, I kept noticing all of her tops were super low cut. And like I said in part 1, yes, she has great boobs, but now I was thinking she was wearing them for a different reason. This is when I also started noticing that she never wore a bra. Fast forward to our wedding day, we're at the church. My sister was the maid of honor and she was doing a great job at keeping me calm. I felt really stressed and I just felt weird about the whole thing with my mother-in-law. So I decided to go look for her and talk to her. This is when I was told she was with my husband. At the time, my fiance. So I go to his dressing room, I knock on the door, but I don't hear anybody answer. So I decide to just walk in. This is when I see my mother-in-law's dress all the way down to her waist, and my husband latched on to her boob. And she was holding on to him like a baby. That's when she yells at me to just get out. So I did. I was shocked and repulsed. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I thought, hell no, confront them now. I walked back in and he's telling her to put her dress on and he's trying to run after me. I told him no need. This is when she told me that this was none of my business and that this was a family thing. Then my fiance explained that he's been breastfeeding for all this time. He's in his late 30s and he's still breastfeeding. And that it's just a way for him and his mom to stay close. First off, how is she still making breast milk? Then she said the craziest thing ever. She said that they wouldn't make me sign a prenup if I didn't tell their secret. Like I told you guys, they are millionaires. Up until this point, nobody had brought up a prenup. But I didn't care about that. I told her that I didn't want to go through with the wedding. Then they talked me off the ledge and promised me that they wouldn't do it again. She explained that this keeps her young. It's like her fountain of youth, and that this is her way of making her children strong, virile, and successful. They were able to calm me down because I was freaking out. We went through with the wedding, but things are just not the same for me. Is this really none of my business? Am I missing something? Is this normal? Or am I overreacting by wanting to get a divorce? I can't get that image out of my head. What should I do?
Storytime, absence does make the heart grow fonder. So a little background information, I was 18 years old and I had just graduated high school and I had been in a situationship with this guy for probably 6 months. And trust me, I know 6 months is a long time, but both of our lives were super busy and he just wasn't ready to commit. And before you say it, yes, we already had 20 talks about how since we're doing relationship things, we should just be in a relationship. But of course it was his way or the highway. So finally, the one day we're hanging out and a girl FaceTimes him. And I acted like I didn't see it, but I knew that as soon as he went to the bathroom, I was checking that phone. Fast forward, he goes to the bathroom, I go on the phone and I see that he's been texting about meeting up with this girl for the past few weeks. So I confront him about it and I'm like, hey, this isn't gonna work. And he's like, we're not even dating, why are you mad? And I was like, okay, fine, you're right, we're not dating, so get out of my house. So after that, he didn't call or text me for a month, which I was super sad about, but then again, it was kind of my fault. But I refused to break no contact because I was not about to be disrespected again. Well, after a month, he reaches out telling me that he's ready for a relationship with me and he doesn't want any other girl. And that was 5 years ago, now we're married with kids. Storytime about how my best friend was a snake. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade. And I've been best friends with this girl who we're going to call Callie since 5th grade. Well, fast forward to 8th grade, there was this guy in my class that I really liked. And obviously I told Callie about it because, like, duh, she is my best friend. And she has never talked to this boy. She never even knew who he was before I had told her about him. And by the way, we're going to call him Jake. Well, eventually him and I started talking and she was hyping us up. Like, she really wanted us to be together so bad. And I was really feeling the love and support. Well, not long after that, I had to move to another town for like 3 months because of my dad. So Jake and I, we stopped talking after me being gone for like 2 weeks. And of course, not long after that, one of my friends from home texted me. And she's like, hey, you know Callie and that guy that you were talking to, right? AKA Jake. Obviously, I say yes. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my best friend was a snake. So like I said, I had to move away for 3 months because of my dad, and Jake and I, we stopped talking about 2 weeks after I had left. And then I get a text from my friend saying, hey, you know Callie and that guy that you were talking to, Jake? Obviously, I say yes. And then she goes, oh, well, they're talking about getting together. And I was livid. I'm like, dude, I've literally been gone for like less than a month and you're already trying to get with the guy that I liked. What the actual you know what? So I bawled my eyes out for like 2 hours straight. And then I decide that I'm going to confront her. And she literally says to me, like, she has the audacity to say that she's been in love with him for so long, even before I had told her about him. Which is a lie, because as I told you guys earlier, she didn't know this man. Well, anyways, Jake ended up friend-zoning her, and she didn't even really apologize to me. She said sorry, but like, she didn't acknowledge the importance of the situation and how it made me feel. She just thought that saying sorry would make it all better. Storytime about why you should never get romantically involved with someone that you work with. So a little background information, I was working at one of the largest discount retail stores in the US, and about a couple months into me working there, my manager and I took a liking to each other. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm underage and he's a full-grown adult. But that's besides the point. Him and I, we started sneaking around a lot together, and about a month after him and I were screwing around with each other, he wanted to end things. Which I was like, alright, sure, whatever. But clearly he didn't mean it because we were still doing the same stuff. that we were doing before he, quote, ended things with me. Anyway, so a random day at work, I don't know what the hell crawled up his ass, but he just snapped at me the one day. He starts threatening to write me up, and he started talking down to me any chance that he got. Like, how are you gonna talk down to me when you literally were just hanging out with me last week? Like, you're a full-grown man. Act like it, please. Like for part 2. Storytime about how my cat got me grounded. And yes, I mean my literal pet cat got me grounded. So a little background information. I was 16 and I was a freshman in high school, and my parents were extremely strict. Now, of course, there was the usual no hanging out with boys, no hanging out with anybody on the weekdays. Well, my parents took it a step further. Actually, no, they took it like 10 miles further. I got my phone taken every night at 6 o'clock. Even on the weekends, and my friends were only allowed to come over for 8 hours exactly on the weekends. And they had to have a ride to and from my house. Well, usually my friend group and I were never invited to any kind of parties, but this one girl who had just moved to our school, she was throwing a huge party and she invited everybody, not just the popular kids. So obviously my friends begged me to go. They were like, please, like, we can sneak over there. Your parents go to bed early anyways. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my cat got me grounded, and yes, I am talking about my pet cat. So like I said, my best friends are begging me to come out of the house. They're like, listen, like, do whatever you have to come to this party. This is the first and probably only party that we will ever be invited to in our entire lives. So at this point, I start planning to sneak out of my house. So my parents usually go to sleep at around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and they usually wake up at 5:30 in the morning. But since this party was on a Friday, obviously my parents aren't going to wake up at that time. They'll usually wake up around like maybe 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. So this gave me a perfect amount of time to do what I needed to do, come back and not get caught. But just in case, I made sure to turn off any alarms on their phone. But I also had to make sure that I had a foolproof plan to get out of the house and get back in. Now, of course, I couldn't go through any of the doors in the house because of the stupid Ring doorbell. But there was one thing that did work in my favor. So my dad had been slowly but surely installing the window security alarms, but he hadn't made it to my room yet, so I was good to sneak out of my window. And thankfully, my window was on the first floor. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how my cat got me grounded, and yes, I am talking about my pet cat. So like I said, I had a foolproof plan to escape, okay? I was going to get out the window and I was going to just crawl back in and act like nothing ever happened. But there was an issue with this, okay? My dad was supposed to fix my window because I somehow broke it. I don't even know how. But anytime that I go to put my window up, it just literally falls. And not only does it fall, it locks when it falls. And obviously you can guess what will happen if it does fall. I won't be able to get back in the house and I will somehow have to get in the house without my parents knowing, which is literally impossible. So I will be grounded for the rest of my life. So I was going to put a book between the window and the windowsill, but I didn't want it falling and making a lot of noise. So I decided to put a pillow there. So I snuck out of my house at 11 o'clock and I had the best time of my life. Probably because that's the first and only time that I will ever be invited to any party. But fast forward, I go and I run to the side of the house to get into my window, and of course the pillow is missing. And I'm looking around to see where the pillow went in my room, and of course my cat is laying on it on the floor. So I tried messing with the window, and then all of a sudden my parents walked in my room and saw me.
My father-in-law is forcing my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time, and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup today. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. Now, we did get married very, very young. By very young, I mean I was 18 and he was 19. When we started dating in high school, his dad was totally against the relationship. See, my husband was super popular. He played on the football team. All the girls chased him. He also played basketball and was perfect at everything he did. As you can imagine, was extremely strict with him. He was not even allowed to go out on weekends. Me, on the other hand, my parents are pretty much hippies. They let me do whatever I want. We're all very spiritual. My parents have full trust in me. Because of this, I make smart decisions. I actively seek my parents' advice. I even told my parents I lost my virginity when I did. And we had a big conversation about it. It was not dramatic. It was not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. They just support me in everything I do. Now, my husband's parents are not the same. They tell him not to do a lot of things. They try to control him. So as we were dating in high school, his dad kept telling him to break up with me. He claimed that I was holding him back and that because of me, he spent less time training. Which technically, yes, is true. But at the same time, you cannot stop your son from experiencing human relationships. In fact, he actually broke up with me for 2 weeks. But then we got back together in secret. Everything culminated when he asked me to marry him right after graduation. His parents were absolutely against it. But my parents were all for it. You guessed it, go to part 2. My father-in-law wants my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. When he asked me to marry him right out of high school, his parents absolutely freaked. They went to my parents' house and told me off for saying yes. In other words, they were completely blaming me for the whole thing, as if their own son didn't go buy a ring and ask me to marry him. He even did a beautiful proposal, which he had been planning for months. But at this point, his parents didn't even know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. When they came to my house, his mom, my now mother-in-law, started crying and yelling at me. She told me that I was ruining their family, that I was trying to steal her son, and that all I really cared about was their money. By the way, my parents were middle class, but we were not destitute. His parents are very rich. They own several businesses. But of course, I'm not after their money. That's when they said that if we did end up getting married, I would have to sign a prenup. And I said, yeah, I want to marry him because I'm in love. At this point, his parents knew they couldn't stop us. We were going to get married with or without their approval. But thankfully, his parents came around and let us get married. We had a quaint, small wedding. It was so magical. But his parents wanted him to go to college to play football. In other words, they wanted him to be the next Tom Brady. They made him train for hours, and they didn't even let us live together for the first year we were married. And because they were supporting him, he couldn't say no. They had us on a schedule. Could only see him for about 2 to 3 hours a day. And we were married. 2 years later, he's playing for a football team. But his parents keep thinking that I'm dragging him down. So now they're trying to convince him to leave me. Go to part 3. My father-in-law is trying to convince my husband to divorce me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and this is the final part of the 3-part story time. I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. After a year of us being married, his parents did not allow us to live together because he needed to focus on football. So obviously, I was living with my parents. I was focusing on my own studies, but his parents did allow us to see each other 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, you might think my husband is a total pushover, but let me explain something. His parents paid for all of his training and his entire college tuition. They gave him the best of everything. He got sports massages every single day. They even installed a cold plunge in their backyard. They also had a full gym setup where he and his teammates would go work out every single day. In their house. Obviously, he did not have time for little old me. After a year of this, I couldn't take anymore. I wanted to be with my husband. So I gave him an ultimatum. That he tell his parents that he and I wanted to live together. That's all I wanted. I was even willing to pay for half of the rent. And he told his parents, they said fine. And they bought us a house. Obviously under my husband's name, not mine. Fast forward another year up until now. I've heard his dad tell him on several occasions that he needs to divorce me. That he could find a much prettier wife once he becomes bigger in the NFL. And I walked in on his mom telling him that maybe I can't even have kids. And that he should have me checked. My parents-in-law hate me. I sometimes feel like I am holding him back. They make us miserable. My parents think I should just walk away from the marriage, but I'm too in love. Should I confront my parents-in-law? Help me think of what I should say to them.
Storytime about my strict grandma. So a little background information. In January 2023, I was really looking forward to having a sleepover at my friend's house. But my grandma quickly shut that shit down because she said that my friend was, quote, emo, according to the way my friend dressed. Like, girly, it's 2024. Anyways, I tried to argue with her and say that that doesn't mean that she's a bad influence. But my grandma, stuck in her ways, just wasn't having it. Instead, she said that I was going to be staying the weekend at my aunt's house with my brother and my cousin. So while I was at my aunt's house, I decided to sneak over to my friend Oliver's house. Get your head out of the gutter. It was nothing like that. We both agreed to be strictly friends. Anyway, so I hung out at his house with him and his brother Connor, and we were giving each other's Instagrams a makeover. Now keep this in mind for later. We ended up changing my username to the Beaner 2.0. Oh, and when I said I snuck over Oliver's house, I mean for my grandma. Like, my aunt knew about everything, but my grandma wasn't watching me, so I didn't care to tell her. Fast forward, the weekend's over, my grandma comes to pick us up, and later on that night, she brings up my Instagram username to me. Like for Part 2 about my super strict grandma. So like I said, my grandma brings up my username, the Beaner 2.0, to me later on that night. She started telling me that she was super concerned about the lack of self-respect I had for myself and how I need to start caring more about what other people thought about me. But honestly, I didn't care. I tried explaining that I didn't mind the term Beaner since I'm half Mexican and I've already faced racism before, so to me, it's just a word. After I explained that, I thought that her and I were good because she stopped arguing with me. And then she starts bringing up my Instagram posts. She's like, who are these boys that you were with? Whose house is this? Blah, blah, blah. Because I guess my aunt had told her that I went over a friend's house, but she didn't specify that it was a boy. So my grandma was fine with it. Anyway, so she had a field day with that shit, and the next day she decided to take my phone away because of the consequences of my actions, claiming that this situation was so serious that she had to get the police involved. This whole situation resulted in me being grounded forever, and we had to start attending family therapy sessions after this. Yeah.
Then President Juarez declared May 5th the official anniversary of the Battle of Puebla, which we now know as Cinco de Mayo. Fast forward to the 1980s, something really interesting started happening. Beer companies started capitalizing on Cinco de Mayo. They started marketing their beer based around the holiday. And with that, it blew up. Americans started celebrating Cinco de Mayo everywhere, what we now know as Cinco de Mayo. It's a completely different and commercialized version of what Cinco de Mayo is. I'm sure if you went to any bar celebrating Cinco de Mayo, I think most people in there are not going to know why Cinco de Mayo is celebrated or that there was even a battle that happened in 1862. George W. Bush was the first president to celebrate Cinco de Mayo at the White House.
Cinco de Mayo is a day for special pride and remembrance for people on dos lados de la frontera. It's a reminder of the proud heritage of many Americans.
Nowadays, it seems like people assume that Cinco de Mayo is the Mexican Independence Day, which is completely wrong. That's in September. The U.S. made it into a consumerist holiday. People don't even know why they are celebrating it. And if you haven't followed me already, you should totally follow me, okay? Oh, I'm also a day late, but I was on a plane yesterday, so that's my excuse. Bye!
Get ready with me to go out to the bar with my friends. Usually I'll go to the clubs that are like super busy, but tonight I'm kind of just looking for a chill night where I can just wear my jean shorts and my crop top instead of putting on a whole outfit. And also I really do not feel like having a million other people sweat all over me. I've had a lot of you guys ask me how I do my eyes, so I'm going to show you how I do like my smoky eyeliner wing. First thing that I do is I go in with Tattoo Studio by Maybelline and I do my waterline, and when I do it on the bottom, I stop like right to where my eye is right there. And then after that, I'm gonna go in with eyeliner and I'm just gonna do it very tightly against my lash line. And then after I do that, I'm gonna make a super small wing. Then I'm gonna go in with the tattoo liner again. I'm gonna make a, put a little bit right there. Go in with an angled brush like this. And I just start to pull this up. And then if I feel like it needs to be a little blended out, I'll go in with my beauty blender and I'll just kind of blend it upwards. So then it'll end up looking like this. I just did my mascara on this eye and now we're going to do it on this one. So we're going to go in with the Lash Sensational Maybelline, and I just go and I make sure to close my eyes because I don't want to put it at the root. When you put it at the root, it weighs your lashes down. And I just got some PR from Makeup by Mario. These are their Moisture Glow Plumping Lip Serums, so I want to wear one of these tonight. We're going to try Nude Glow first. Okay, but she's actually kind of cute. This one is Petal Glow. I need to hurry up. Let me know what you guys think down below. I mixed Nude Glow with Petal Glow, and I kind of like
Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? There was not my story time. It's on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 11 months. Here's a little backstory. We both work at the same company and live very far from our parents. I try to go home once a month since my parents are only 2 hours away from me. His parents live in a different country. For that reason, I haven't met his parents. But he's met my parents and he's been completely respectful and really nice to them. So I never suspected that he could be abusive to his parents. So here's what happened. We flew over to his parents and they are very rich. His mom is an interior designer and their house is phenomenal. His dad owns a couple of businesses and together they are very wealthy. His parents went to pick us up at the airport and everything was fine until we got to their house. They decided to give me a tour of their ginormous mansion. That's when I noticed that my boyfriend was being kind of rude to them. Every time they would ask me a question, he would answer and be like, duh, she likes pizza. He even asked his mom to stop asking stupid questions. I stopped him in his tracks and in front of his parents I said, why are you being rude to your parents? The look on his parents' face was of shock. And that's when I realized that they had never disciplined him. But then it got worse. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. Disclaimer is now my story time listed on my Instagram. The look on his parents' face when I called him out for being rude to them was complete shock. After they gave me the tour of the house, we decided to sit down for dinner. They are so rich that they have their own chef. That's when the chef comes out and starts serving all the food. And as soon as my boyfriend sees what they served, he grabs his glass of water and bangs it against the table. He looks at both of his parents and says, what the fuck is wrong with you both? The color from their faces drain. That's when they said, I'm sorry, we didn't know he was gonna make this. The chef decided to make a really fancy meatloaf. Apparently he hates meatloaf. Then he said, well, tell him to make something else. His mother gets up and runs to the kitchen and asks the chef to make him a burger, because that's his favorite food. Which, by the way, I never even knew that. He always told me his favorite food was Indian. His mom comes back from the kitchen, then he looks at me and says, you don't have to eat that shit if you don't want to. I told him that he was being a brat and that I'd be happy to eat the meatloaf. His parents look at me and smile. My boyfriend just gets up from the table and runs away. Can you believe I had to chase after him? Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on Instagram. That's when my stupid boyfriend runs away from the dinner table. So of course I have to chase him. And of course I'm angry at this point. I ask him why he's being so rude to his parents. Then he literally denies that he just did anything. His words were, you're reading too much into it. My parents are stupid anyway. I looked at him and I said, do you not see the mansion we're standing in? How did 2 stupid people manage to build this mansion, 4 businesses, and put you through school? He rolls his eyes at me and says, Jesus Christ, you sound like my parents. I told him that he was a privileged rat. You see, I come from a family where we don't have chefs and we don't have millions of dollars or a mansion. So I appreciate everything my parents did for me. I went back to the dining room and I told his parents it was nice to meet them, but that I could no longer be with their son. That's when his mom started begging me not to leave. It was hard, but I called an Uber and I went home. My boyfriend's been begging me to get back with him. He's trying really hard too. His parents are even offering to pay my student loans. I'm honestly confused now. What should I do?
Story time. I was the toxic best friend. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And at the beginning of the year, I met this girl who we're going to call Riley. Riley and I hit it off straight away. Like a week after knowing each other, she knew everything about me and I knew everything about her. Well, then she tells me about this guy that she's talking to, who we're going to call Jay. She said that they would hook up sometimes and he would text her sometimes. But she said that I couldn't tell anybody because he said that it had to be a secret. So I tried telling her that he sounded like a fuckboy, but she decided she was going to do whatever she wanted. And I was like, okay. So fast forward to the end of the year, he adds me on Snapchat. Okay, don't get me wrong. He was really hot, but I had my own thing going on. So I really didn't pay that much attention to him. And I thought he maybe added me on Snapchat to be like, oh my God, I really like your best friend. And then I also was caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I tell my best friend that the guy that she likes just added me on Snapchat? Or do I lie to her? Well, I was going to tell her until I got a Snapchat from him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was the toxic best friend. So like I said, I didn't know whether I should tell her that he added me on Snapchat or if I should. And I was going to until I got a Snapchat from him saying, hey, you're really pretty. I think we should talk sometime. So I ended up telling her about it because I felt really bad. And she was like, this is why I can't trust girls. Like, you need to unadd him right now. Like, fucking block him. And I'm like, I didn't even do anything. Like, what the fuck? So whatever. I end up blocking him. It's fine. Until he texts me one day. And he's like, hey, it's Jay. I think you blocked me on Snapchat, LOL. And him and I had talked a little bit in school and I kind of started to like him. Well, fast forward, him and I ended up hooking up a few times. We were talking a lot. And he hadn't been texting Riley as much. Well, the one night while I was sleeping over at her house, my phone was going off a lot. And I didn't think to delete any of the messages, like for part 3.
Story time about how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. This man is the most prudish person I have ever met in my entire life. He never curses, he does not drink. Basically, he's never done anything naughty in his life. When we met, he was the perfect candidate for me. My parents are very religious and very strict. When they saw the way my husband was, basically super uptight, never wanting to do anything fun, they insisted that I marry him. So basically, this is all my parents' fault. To be honest with you guys, I never really was super attracted to him, but I knew that he would be a good provider. He's pretty high up in the company he works for, and he makes north of $300,000 per year. But I do own 2 of my own businesses, so it's not like I need him to survive. But my parents insisted on me marrying somebody who was already well off. And of course, one of my dreams is to become a mother, so I need a man who's going to be able to provide for me and my kids, especially when I'm pregnant. So we ended up getting married. Was there passion and chemistry? Not so much. But we did have a good time, and he would make me laugh. We essentially became really good friends. Up until I found some stuff on his laptop. Part 2 is that. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. One day while I was working from home, I needed to get on his laptop to check our cameras. I just gotten a new set of security cameras for our house. I needed to make sure that they were all working. I opened his laptop, typed in the password, and it was wrong. It always had the same password for the past 5 years. I didn't bother texting him, instead I tried to guess. And because I know this man so well, I guessed it in the first try. But as soon as I log in, there's about 5 Craigslist windows open, all with similar titles. Male looking for male. Male interested in male company. This literally shook me to my core. You're telling me that I'm married to a gay man and that he's hooking up with men off of Craigslist? That's when I went ahead and checked his email, only to find that he had been sending pictures and other things to these men. Not only that, but he had met with 2 of them. I instantly printed out all the evidence. Like I said in part 1, I'm not particularly attracted to my husband. I never have been. I really only married him because my parents pressured me into it. Here's what I did. Instead of just asking for a divorce, I wanted to humiliate him. I needed to make him pay. After printing everything out, I sent it to his job. And I sent it to his parents and my parents. Part 3 is up. That's when I sent videos of my own husband hooking up with other men to his job, my parents, and his parents. At this point, I had been married to a man that I wasn't attracted to for 5 years, only to find out that he was hooking up with other men. Off of Craigslist. Remember I said in part 1 how prudish my husband was? He always made himself seem like he was the perfect man, like he had never done anything bad in his life. But let me tell you, some of the things I read in those emails, and the pictures, and the video, disgusting. No wonder he put off having kids for so long. And no wonder he made me get on the pill, because he never had the intention of having kids. When everyone received their packages, my husband called me super upset. He said that he had only done it for about a week, and that it was just him experimenting. And he told me that his job put him on suspension. My parents, of course, stopped speaking to him. My mother-in-law calls me on the phone and tells me that she had always known that he was gay. And apparently they insisted on him not marrying me. But he was set on having the perfect wife. The perfect life. We're obviously getting a divorce now, and I'm getting all his money. Or at least I'm gonna try. He's already claiming that I'm obsessed with him, so he wants to get a restraining order. I need to make him suffer even more. How should I do this? Part 4 will be up soon. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on Instagram. My mom and dad had me when they were really young. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. For some reason, my mom doesn't like talking about him, so I never really found out exactly how they broke up. All I know is that they stayed together until I was 5 years old. Something really bad happened, and then my mom kicked him out of the house. Like I said, I don't even know what happened. I was 12 years old, he begged my mom to come back, and she let him live in the apartment we had. But he's pretty much a deadbeat. He didn't help my mom pay for the bills. He didn't even want to get a job. He even went as far as begging my mom to become a stripper. He said that she would make way more money than the job she had. She was a secretary at the time. When I was 15, he left our house again. I never got a bad feeling from him when he was living with us though. With a lot of hard work, my mom was able to put me through college. I graduated and I got a really good job. I bought my mom and me a house and we moved in together. Then COVID happened and I lost my job. Friends suggested I start OnlyFans and I decided to do it. I started making a lot more money than I ever thought I would. Some months I was making around $20,000. This one guy would send me $1,000 every single week. In exchange for pictures. Part 2 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. So this one guy started sending me $1,000 every single week. In exchange, I would send him private photos. Everything was totally fine until he started asking me questions. He would ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite dessert? Because it's OnlyFans, I never really answered honestly. But then one day he told me, you love The Little Mermaid, don't you? And I was like, what? Because The Little Mermaid was my favorite movie as a kid. Watched it at least 3 times a week when I was a kid. First I thought it was a cousin playing a joke on me, so I decided to block them. The next day, I get another message. This one says, I remember how you used to love hot dogs. That's when I really shit myself. Because my dad and I would make hot dogs every single Friday. It was our thing together. Like I said, he was a deadbeat, so he couldn't afford anything more than cheap hot dogs. And that's when he said, I have a confession. And before I could reply, he said, I'm your dad. I felt so disgusted. I blocked him and then blocked him from my cell phone too. That's when he sends me a long text message explaining why he signed up to my OnlyFans. He said that he was just trying to get to know me, that all he really wanted was to get me back as his daughter. Then why ask for nudes? Part 3 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. As soon as I read his long text message about why he signed up, I once again blocked him. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Yep, it's my fucking father. Started knocking on the door so hard my neighbors came out, called 911 and they came within a minute. I live in an area where there aren't too many people, so my house is really easy to find. Saw my dad walk to the backyard and try to get in through the back. That's when a cop stopped him and asked him what he was doing. Then he told the cop that I had invited him over. Then the cop comes to my door and asked me if I had invited him. I told him I didn't. Then I told the cop about OnlyFans. My dad was so ashamed he actually denied it. But of course I had all the receipts. Showed the cop my phone and the cop told him that he needed to leave me alone. He left my house and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom. But later that night I see another person sign up to my OnlyFans. Turns out it was my dad again. This time he was offering me $3,000 for more pictures. And he confessed that he couldn't help but love me as a woman because I didn't grow up with him. Excuse me, sir? You raised me for half of my childhood. Wanted to get a restraining order, but the judge says it's not that easy. So now I'm considering closing my OnlyFans. I don't think it's fair though. What should I do?